with you for a second as I prepared a few slides for us to get started. Oh, look, it's right my introduction. Didn't even start with the title slide, but this is me. Thank you for those kind words. I would say that my students and I are very passionate about making evidence-based approaches for sleep problems widely available. We're very interested in the link between sleep and depression. And so I thought it would be fun for us to talk about sleeping well during the pandemic. And of course, it will translate beyond that. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram, because my daughter says it's very embarrassing how few followers I have. So that would be really great if you could do that. Speaking of numbers, why don't we start with a big one? 100 million people have significant insomnia at any time. It's an extremely prevalent problem, and you may be having some problems during the pandemic with sleep, whether they reach diagnostic levels or not, I'm not sure. But this is definitely something that we see, on Twitter quite often. You'll see hashtag insomnia trending, and again, my students and I are so interested in trying to find solutions for people so that we're not having these hashtags constantly trending. I think, in all seriousness, one of the reasons why this problem is of such interest is that it is an independent predictor of a lot of negative things occurring. So certainly we know it's a predictor of suicide. It's a reliable predictor of the development of PTSD after trauma exposure. It's a predictor of depression, substance abuse, anxiety disorders. And so there's this desire among professionals to protect sleep as both a preventative measure, but also as an adjunctive treatment for other mental health problems. And I think right now what I'm noticing on social media and the news in particular is that there's this sort of well-meaning message: get more sleep. That's how you're going to protect your immunity. And I understand why people are sharing that message, but it is creating problems for people with insomnia, because getting more sleep, that doesn't make sense, right? I mean, it increases pressure to sleep, and the more pressure you have to sleep, then the more elusive it is. And for many people, increasing your time in bed to get more sleep is actually sleep disruptive. So it's counterproductive for many people. And it increases something that we'll talk quite a bit about tonight, which is conditioned arousal. So that is being awake while in bed, which becomes its own problem. Getting more sleep is really only relevant for people who don't prioritize sleep. And that's not who we're talking about when we're talking about insomnia. So I'm going to ask you to consider an alternative over the course of an hour. And that is, I wonder if you could put some faith into your sleep system, if you understood how your sleep system worked, and to actually work with it so that it operates optimally for you. And at the same time, focusing on an effective self-care strategy, one for stress, one for fatigue, and so on. So that's what I'm going to try and convince you of over the course of the hour. The one thing I do want to say that's really weird is that there are about as many causes for insomnia as a symptom, having a bad night, as there are people. And I'd like to think I'm pretty good, but I can't prevent you from having a bad night. That's part of the human condition. But one that is getting rid of chronic insomnia, and that's because chronic insomnia occurs for 3 reasons, and 3 reasons only. One is that there could be a problem with your clock, that it's not regulated. One is that your deep sleep drive may be very low. And the last one is conditioned arousal. And I'm going to talk about those right now, but I'm going to talk about them in the context of tips, because that's probably what you're interested in. So the first one is, I think that people need to, during this time, work with their clock, not against it. Our body clock is responsible for hormonal release, for alertness, for sleep, for many, many things. And we have these clocks that require daily setting because it's longer than 24 hours. And regularity is the key for confirming the time for our body. It's the thing that's going to set your clock. So any irregularity is going to result in jet lag symptoms without traveling, right? So jet lag doesn't actually have anything to do with being on a jet. It's the mismatch between the environmental cues where you've traveled to and what time those environmental cues say to your body, and then what time the body actually thinks it is. And when there's this discrepancy, this mismatch, it creates unpleasant symptoms like fatigue and difficulty sleeping or getting up, or even gastrointestinal symptoms or fogginess. So we want to set an alarm every day, even though we don't need to right now. Now, I know that does not sound fun. So I'm going to suggest that if you're somebody that's enjoying not having an alarm being set, then set a latest possible time to get up, right? So if you normally wake up around 7, then go ahead and set the alarm for 8 to make sure that you don't oversleep. That's because your body should be getting up around the same time every day. You should be getting some light exposure every day, and that's something that's pretty tricky right now, right? So it may mean that you focus on unnatural light in your house, but if you can get out, that's even better. And eating meals around the same time, that's going to be really helpful as well. So I want you to consider that you may be simulating jet lag with your habits. So I have a sleep diary up here to show you this. Look at the earliest and latest time at which you go to bed. And in this particular person, there's 4 hours difference. So 4 hours difference is like a time zone that's like 4 hours different from you. So that would be like Halifax to Vancouver. And would you expect to be able to go from Halifax to Vancouver and not feel any negative effects? The answer is probably no. And you can see this person, the difference between their earliest rise time and their latest is the equivalent of 5 hours, which is essentially Europe. And if you're going to go to Europe, that's one thing, so that's fun. But if you're going to do it just physiologically, it is not so fun, and it's going to feel pretty bad. Now, this is a time at which I become very unpopular with people when I make these suggestions. You know, what do you expect us to do, Colleen? You know, we like to be spontaneous. We don't want to be overly regulated. So I'm going to try and get myself off the hook by using an analogy here. I'm going to talk about cupcakes, right? So do we need to have strict schedules? Well, certainly 1 hour difference, which is daylight savings time, we all feel. Is it a big deal? No, but we do feel it. And so that gives you an idea on a day-to-day basis when you're varying it for more than an hour. That said, healthy sleepers may value spontaneity. They may dislike having a routine. It might make them think like they're like a kid. And they may have good coping strategies for the kinds of jet lag symptoms that they have. In reality, they probably just don't know that that's the reason why, and so that's why they're coping well with it. So think of it like this. Cupcakes are fine, especially in moderation. Nothing wrong with a cupcake, right? But I want you to think about a cupcake in the context of diabetes, right? It takes on a different meaning. So people with insomnia, they need the help of their clock. And if they're going to dysregulate their clock, and on top of feeling how they feel with insomnia, they're going to feel like they're in a continual state of jet lag, then it's going to be very difficult for them to cope. So that's why we're going to really emphasize when you have insomnia that you should be even stricter with your schedule. I'm not trying for perfectionism here. I understand when it comes to health-related behaviors that that people are not always going to make their best choice every single time, and that's not really the point, right? But I want you to make an informed choice. I want you to know that varying your schedule does have that impact. And I don't want you to live to sleep and put sleep above everything else. I just want you to know what some healthy habits are, and then you can make your own decision. So hopefully we're still friends after my first piece of advice. The second one is not going to be much more popular, and that is don't stay in bed when you can't sleep. Now, there's many reasons why you might be having difficulty sleeping. It could be a weird dream. It could be that your mind won't shut off. It could honestly just be that you are awake. If you're going to spend that extended period of time in bed awake, unfortunately, you may train yourself to do it unintentionally. Too much time in bed, it turns out, is just as harmful as too little time in bed for different reasons, but similar effects. And this is one way, staying in bed when you're awake and you can't sleep, in which a bad night's sleep or two turns into chronic insomnia. So it's really important that we have a strategy for that. And you have this problem if it feels like you are ready for bed, and then when you get into bed, a switch goes off and you're wide awake. That means you have conditioned arousal, and it means that the bed, and sometimes the bedroom or bedtime routine, has become paired with wakefulness. And this is what we call conditioned arousal. So many times people will say, yeah, but what do I do to quiet an active mind? So I'm going to give you some tips about that. First of all, if the issue really has to do with emotional business that's visiting you that you didn't deal with during the day, you say busy, 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 you get into bed, and then you're wide awake, then certainly you can set aside time to deal with that when you're at your problem-solving best. So in the early evening, it might be better to create lists or engage in some sort of structured problem solving, talking out a problem with somebody else. And certainly you can journal. There's studies that have shown that journaling your sort of uncensored thoughts and feelings about an issue is a great way to be able to put some of that aside. We know that meditation practices, yoga, mindfulness, that these can have a very positive effect on not only arousal, but it often helps with quieting the mind, right? And it's very important that we're not using techniques like this to put somebody to sleep, because that is sleep effort, and that's not what we want. In fact, meditation, a good mindfulness practice, is really about falling awake, not falling asleep. And so it's really important that we frame it in the right way. Certainly creating a buffer zone an hour before bed. We do this for kids. We're not going to let them do crazy stuff right up to the time they go to bed. And then they're going to have a reliable routine of wind down and bedtime routine that is going to cue their body into being ready for sleep. So that's something that's important. What can you do in the buffer zone? It doesn't really matter. I just would rather you not be engaging in goal-directed activities unless it's a hobby. So knitting, perhaps the ultimate goal is to have a sweater, but really most people are knitting for the sake of knitting. They enjoy it. So, and certainly getting out of bed when it occurs, when your mind switches on like that, that's going to be a very effective strategy. Leaving the room and not coming back until that has stopped. That's a very effective tip for that problem. If it relates to anxiety or depression, it's really important that you do seek treatment. Many people are under the impression that they cannot see their therapist, that they cannot get help during this time. That's not true. That people are being seen via telehealth and other modalities. Even if there is an emergency, people can still go to the emergency room, and it's very important that we understand that you can still seek treatment at this time. There are many resources available. And one thing that might not be obvious, but sometimes an active mind is actually more about being unprepared for sleep or not building up a deep sleep drive that inhibits those thoughts in the pre-sleep period. So let's talk about that for 1 second. How do we build sleep drive so that we can sleep deeply? Well, this mechanism is very interesting. From the moment that we are awake and out of bed, we build a drive for deep sleep. And we want to have sufficient amount of activity, sufficient amount of time out of bed, a sufficient amount of time of our cells working to build up this drive for deep sleep, that when we do go to sleep, we produce deep sleep. That's actually the way that our body makes up for lost sleep, and that's where you get restoration. So staying active is going to be really important, and it's tricky at this time, isn't it, to stay active? but prioritizing to get some time, some exercise time, and preferably even outside, so that you can get some light exposure would be really helpful. Now, what happens when you go to bed early, earlier than you normally would? You should probably get less deep sleep buildup. And the reason why is that you get up in the morning and you're building this drive, but then you cut it off before it's really full, when it's really reached its peak. And the typical result of that is having less deep sleep drive. So even if it takes you a normal amount of time to fall asleep, that doesn't mean that you had enough deep sleep drive. So did you find that your sleep was light? Did you wake up after an hour or two and then find yourself awake for a considerable amount of time? So I think that's something to really consider. Likewise, if you sleep in or lay in the morning, and normally you would have built this amount of time into your deep sleep drive, now you have a lesser amount of time to build that deep sleep drive. And so most people are not going to have an adequate amount of deep sleep drive built up. Same thing, you're going to get less deep sleep, less restoration. You might feel achy, it might feel lighter, and you definitely might feel more tired as well. Naps are similar because you're going to build up that sleep drive, and then you get into bed and you nap. Even if it's brief, you are dispelling, getting rid of the deep sleep drive that you've built up, the chemical that you've built up, and now you've got to start building again from scratch. And so most people do not have enough time left in the day to replenish what they lost during that nap. Now, this is another time where I become very unpopular again, so I'm going to bring back my cupcakes. I want you to remember that naps are not inherently bad, right? So naps are something that are very helpful for something called sleepiness, which we do not see in insomnia. Sleepiness is you are falling asleep involuntarily during the day, and most people with insomnia do not have that. And if you need a strategy for that, then taking a very brief nap can be helpful with sleepiness. So it's actually helpful. And certainly the briefer they are and the earlier they are in the day, then the less sleep disruptive they are. But even that, it does not actually make up for the lost sleep that you're getting. So it only helps you with sleepiness. So we nap for sleepiness to get rid of it. But we never nap for sleep, because naps are always sleep disruptive, even if you don't feel it. So this is one of those cupcake situations, again, where naps are fine, but not in the context of insomnia, because they already have low deep sleep drive. They are afraid they're not able to cope with feeling tired during the day. And so trying to avoid that by trying to nap, it sort of doesn't allow them to face that fear. And it's not great stimulus control, meaning that if you sleep outside of your sleep window and it gets rid of that association between the bed at this time being the place where you're going to sleep. So not helpful. Okay. Tip number 3 is, it doesn't sound like a sleep tip at all, but I'm going to maintain it is. So I want people during this time to physically distance, but stay social. And we know that animals that are social animals that are socially isolated actually show worse sleep and symptoms that look a lot like depression. So humans really do need some sort of social contact. When people are bored, they often confuse boredom with fatigue. Oftentimes boredom is the cause of fatigue. And so staying active and not underdoing it is really important. So everyone always says, well, don't overdo it because you'll get tired. Don't underdo it or you'll get tired. So that's something that's probably pretty important. Socializing does keep us active and engages us. It helps us with our mood. It builds up sleep drive, but it also keeps us regular. And that's kind of weird, right? So that's basically, I'm not going to invite you over when all this is over at 10 p.m. for dinner, in which I'm going to serve a box of cookies. Okay. And that's because although on a Saturday night, I might eat for dinner really late, a box of cookies, when I have a person over, I want to look normal. So I will try and invite you over at a normal time with some normal food on the plate because I'm trying to sort of maintain this, this social dance. And so having people around often leads us to engage in more in healthier activities and healthier habits. So that's just sort of that was a study actually that we did, which we found that people with insomnia were much more prone to engage in things all over the place, all over the schedule, and some unusual behaviors as well. No judgment, but we tend to be on our best behavior when people are around. Also, I want people to remember that emotional health is part of sleep health, right? This is why I've emphasized coping or connecting with people. If you are finding yourself that your days are so boring and that you really feel devoid of any pleasure right now, then certainly schedule pleasure if you're forgetting to incorporate it into your day, because it is an important part of our mood and sleep to maintain that. And I would lay off the preoccupation with technology right now. I don't think that being online is the enemy, right? So people are keeping connected via games and video conferencing like we're doing right now, using online or audible books, movie nights, things like that. It's really important that people stay connected. My other tip is about healthy fatigue management. So a lot of people, when they feel tired, they reach for coffee, which is a fine solution short term. Long term, it's not good because you're going to feel more tired later when you withdraw. Or you decrease your activities because you're tired, and that actually increases fatigue. So I'm going to encourage you to be at the helm of your energy levels by hydrating, because dehydration produces fatigue, and eating healthy, regularly timed meals that your blood sugar is not spiking and dropping. And L is for light, getting daylight exposure. That's very helpful for alertness. And if you can't, then making sure that you have adequate lighting in your house to help you with that. And M is for moving. You do need to spend a little energy to get a little energy, which is counterintuitive for some people. But if you don't believe me, I want you to imagine staying on the couch all day and whether or not you feel more sluggish or whether or not you feel energetic. And most people understand that they would feel more sluggish. The other thing I want you to do is to challenge perfectionism. There are many, many sources of stress during the pandemic. And I talked about engaging in relaxation and meditation and wind down and hobbies. I think that's really important. But I want you to hear my tips from this list and understand that these would be helpful, but only doing what you can from this list without the sort of criticism and shaming of, well, I haven't been able to do this and I should be getting better earlier and I should be doing this. Certainly, perfectionistic expectations right now is going to be very difficult from the perspective of mood and sleep. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that. And this is my reminder that if you are saying constantly to yourself, I should be getting more done. I should be sticking my diet. I should. I don't want you to be shooting all over yourself because that's not very helpful at this time. So this might be one of those times to check this kind of thinking and challenging. Is this helpful? Is this actually making me feel more down? Is it making me feel more tired? And if it is, then maybe it's time to adjust some expectations. I want to finish off just with some tips for kids because I'm getting a lot of that right now. As far as babies and kids go, you want to use their clocks. Now, this is intuitive, right? So you know that you're not going to invite somebody over who has a toddler over for dinner at 9. Like you're not going to invite the toddler over at 9, right? Because you know at that point that not only is their meal going to be off if you're not going to serve dinner until that time, but their bedtime would be off. And what's going to happen to your party with that toddler running around. Well, the toddler is going to have a meltdown. And so we do get that. We do understand. I don't think we think that that's their clock, but it is. So we are very careful about having routines with kids. And I think that it's important during this time that your timing might be different, but you should maintain a routine. So if the times are a little off, so that the whole family has shifted a little later, that's fine. If that's what's suiting your family right now, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as everyone is doing well with that. But still stick to a routine to shift the whole window over for everyone. Kids are going to be suffering from not getting enough light exposure. They're usually out many times during the day at recess, getting light exposure and activity. And that's something that's really important for their mood, but also for their clock. And certainly activities are really good for that too. But activities are really helpful because they build deep sleep drive, right? So remember I said being awake and active and out of bed, that's really important. And deep sleep drive is deep sleep. And deep sleep is where you're getting growth hormone, which is really important for kids. It's important for us too, because we will feel achy. We'll actually have myalgias if we don't have deep sleep. So I think that's really important. As far as your kids go, it's not just about sleep. So certainly having schedules of meals, physical activity, and sleep, and when they get up, that's really important. It's also important for us to think about our expectations for them. Are we being perfectionists for them, about them? Are we shooting all over ourselves about their schoolwork? It's important to certainly to attempt the schoolwork, but teachers understand that that everyone's doing the best they can. So I think you need to relax your expectations. Make sure that you encourage them to call their friends, to message their friends, to video conference with their friends, and checking in with them about how they're doing and what they miss most, and sharing with them what you miss most. And I think that's it. That's more than enough. I don't think that we should be setting these big goals during the pandemic, during this time that's very stressful for everyone. This was just something that I saw a friend of mine, Deb Leslie, has her daughter had put together this 25 things to do when you're bored without a screen. I just thought it was interesting. I do want to share something with you. This is an app of mine that's free. It's called Doze. And if you are a teen or a young adult between the ages of 15 to 24, this may be helpful for you. And so it is a free app in which you monitor your sleep, and it provides feedback about how you could improve the way you feel during the day, or how you could improve how you're sleeping. And then it allows you to decide how you're going to address that. So it's completely self-management. It allows the young adult to make their own decisions about what they're going to change. And so they may make some modest goals in some areas that we'd rather them make some more aggressive goals. But in the areas that they do set goals and they achieve them and they see some improvement, it usually encourages them to do more. And that's what we're finding. And so this has been a very helpful app. So I encourage people to take advantage of this free app, Doze, at dozeapp.ca. And again, I think it's 15 to 24 years is what I would say. Well, I think we're almost done. So I mean, I wanted to talk about dreams. Not because I'm interested in dreams, I'm interested in insomnia. And so it's less of an interest of mine, but gosh, I am asked about this all the time during COVID, so I want to talk about it for a second. When people say, I am having these really weird, vivid dreams, you should know that the only way that you're aware that you're having a dream is if you wake up during or right after the dream. So really what I'm hearing when you tell me that I'm really having weird dreams or a lot of dreams, or you're talking about your dreams at all, is that I'm thinking, you're waking up a lot. That's what my thought is. And so there are many different reasons why this could be happening. So one could be having that low, deep sleep drive. So some common culprits are being less active, which many people are saying that they're frustrated because they don't feel like they can be as active as they normally are, and they're spending too much time in bed. So they aren't setting an alarm, so they're kind of lingering in the morning. They're going to bed early because they're bored or tired, and then so it's creating longer time in bed. And when you do that, you have less deep sleep built up, deep sleep build drive built up rather. I think I'm getting sleepy. And when you do that, then you're going to have lighter sleep. And when you have lighter sleep, then you're more prone to little wake ups. And when you're prone to little wake ups, you will be aware of your dreams. When people say they don't dream, they're dreaming. It's just that they're not waking up, and that's why they're not aware. The other thing that people are forgetting is something that is going on during the pandemic, which is people are reporting that they're increasing their alcohol and weed intake. And both substances would actually produce something called rapid eye movement sleep rebound. And what it would mean is that the REM sleep, the dreaming sleep that they get, is going to be more intense. And when it's more intense, people report more dreams. It's also lighter. So both of those substances actually lighten sleep. And of course, sleep becomes much lighter under stress. So, and people are feeling it. There's many different reasons: financial, being isolated, being continuously around a small group of people and not being able to get out. So stress management is really important. Engaging in self-care, knowing when you have to take a moment for yourself. That working out would be an important thing if you're able to work out. Connecting with other people, connecting with your friends is really important. I think people are stretched really thin right now. So engaging in some self-care would be really important. And the last one is pretty obvious, I think, and that is many people are dreaming specifically about COVID-19. I mean, that's not surprising, right? I mean, the news cycle is relentless, and people are connected via TV and their phones and conversations, and we do need to have information about what's going on, so we know what we need to do. But I think the extent to which we are plugged in is probably a little bit too much. So certainly, I think an hour before bed during the wind down period, that it probably should be a COVID-19 blockade. You don't need that information right before you go to bed. And I think that would be really helpful. For people who are dreaming continuously about more catastrophic material, one possibility is when you wake up the next morning, you can write out a bad dream and then rewrite the dream, changing it in a way that you would find helpful. And then throughout the day, rehearsing that new dream, that more positive dream over and over again. And that material is more likely to find its way into your dream. So I think that's one thing that would be possibly helpful for you. I want to thank you for tuning in and for watching this. And I invite you to share your questions. I actually will turn off my screen right now so that I can hear a few questions and see and try and answer them for you. So thank you.
Welcome, Professor Khani. Even though we don't have the audience live right now, we will look at the questions as they come up when we post the videos.
Okay.
As you were talking, and it was in my mind, I want to remind people that you have two excellent books for the public. One is Quiet Your Mind. The other one is The Goodnight Mind, which is also available as an Audible one. I wonder whether it's a lullaby, but it's called and there's a teen version too for that, so that's a great thing, right? So So Professor Carney is not only just doing research, but there's something for the public to use some of her materials. Because people are not there to ask questions, I'm trying to imagine what would be important questions, and I have few, and my colleague
Mm-hmm.
Bonnie also has few questions. One is this, when we go online to the website, I think people get a lot of advice on sleep, like sleep hygiene, for example, which
Mm-hmm.
says, have hot milk, do meditation, don't watch TV, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
What's your view on this whole sleep hygiene? Because it's supposed to make us sleep well, but my patients tell me that they don't sleep much better despite following that advice.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I'm glad that you would ask it, because I think that it's unfair that that advice is posted so widely when it actually does not have evidence. So it is the American Psychological Association has rules for how they determine whether or not a therapy works. And it has been evaluated many, many, many times, so many times, in fact, that over the last 5 years, 10 years, those of us who do clinical trials, we use that as our placebo treatment, because as a control treatment. And what a placebo means is that if you get some improvement, it's a small effect, and it's not durable, and it's not related to the treatment. It's related to the hopefulness that it would work. And we know that it's not positive for sleep. And one of the reasons why is that, well, there's probably many reasons. One is that there's lots in there about substances that are sleep disruptive. But to say to a client to stop smoking in order to sleep better is a very naive ask, because their sleep will get worse. Smoking cessation is very disruptive for sleep, and it will take quite some time before there would be any improvement. And it's not the cause either. So I think that's another point. Smoking marijuana is sleep disruptive. But if somebody is using it for pre-sleep arousal in the pre-sleep period, and you ask somebody to stop smoking and they're a regular smoker of marijuana, not only will their sleep not get better, it probably will get worse, because they have nothing to replace that what they're using for arousal. But also, we know that when somebody's a regular marijuana user, there's some damage that's done with respect to how they can produce deep sleep. And that receptor damage does not come back after a night of abstinence or two, that it takes weeks to months for them to get that back. So to ask somebody to engage in sleep hygiene to fix their sleep problem is very naive, and it's not actually the issue. So sleep hygiene does not operate on the clock. It doesn't help with conditioned arousal. It doesn't help with deep sleep drive. These are sleep disruptive behaviors. It's kind of like saying to somebody, definitely don't have somebody yell at you while you're sleeping. I mean, fair enough, but that's not, like that's not very helpful for people, right? Because people, if that was what was going on, they would address that, and that would be at the end of that. But that's not what's going on with somebody. So to say, have some warm milk before you go to bed, um, that was based on somebody noticing a chemical that was there that would actually induce some sleepiness in a small effect size that was not clinically significant. That's not the same. So it's a wonderful question, and sleep hygiene is not something that is effective on its own. I'm not saying we don't do it at all. I mean, with my teens, they abuse caffeine to a large extent. And so for a variety of reasons, I'm going to ask them to decrease their caffeine use, but I'm under no delusion that their insomnia is going to go away because they've cut down on caffeine. And people with insomnia they feel invalidated because they've been trying and trying and trying this sleep hygiene advice. And as you say, it's not effective.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Bonnie also to ask her questions.
Hi, thank you. I think everybody is hopefully going to understand the importance of sleep and the proactiveness that they can achieve when they have heard you. I have a lot of friends, Dr. Carney, that have Fitbits or kind of sleep monitoring devices. Are they helpful, or what would you recommend around them?
So if somebody has insomnia, I would definitely not want them to have that. I mean, first of all, I mean, they're not accurate. So I think that's really when somebody says, "Oh, I had a bad night this night," or "a good night that night," it often doesn't even match up to their experience, and they feel perplexed. And they use it as a goal, like, "Oh, good, I got a good night's sleep last night," when it is somewhat meaningless. So we know that it actually increases preoccupation with sleep. And so I am not a fan of the Fitbit for the sleep monitoring. And it's not, I'm not biased against the Fitbit. So any of those kinds of monitors. I also want to know why. Because insomnia is a subjective experience. It's an experience, it's a disorder of you feeling like it's taking you a long time to fall asleep, and what ensues after that, which for many people is frustration, or fear, or many other things, and then that sort of leads into the daytime as well. So I would ask people not to use those types of trackers if they have insomnia, because it does lend itself to preoccupation.
Thank you.
That's a really good point, which I often have patients actually asking. They actually come and show me their trackers with iPhones and Fitbits, etc. I'm sure people have heard that exercise is good for sleep, and lots of people are exercising, trying to keep healthy. Anything in relation to that? How people should exercise, what they should do, how they should time it. What is your view on that?
Yeah, now exercise is part of sleep hygiene, and the tricky thing about that is that we have studies that show that you can exercise right before bed, and it has a positive impact on your body temperature that allows you to fall asleep more quickly. We have just as many studies to show that it's sleep disruptive in the pre-sleep period because it increases arousal. And we know that exercise seems to be helpful with respect to that deep sleep drive that we talked about. Of course, there's like overdoing it, and then it can create pain. So what I try and do is, I think that activity is healthy. And if somebody's going to exercise as part of that activity, I think it's a good one. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to encourage them to be their own little detective. If it's something that they can't predict whether or not it's going to keep them up at night, then let's move it earlier in the day. And if they're finding that they're going to bed sore, then maybe we want to scale back on that. So we don't have good research to be able to really prescribe what would be the optimal type of exercise for people. And since I'm really interested in deep sleep drive, and we know that activity is good enough, then I would be pretty happy that they were just engaging in. Certainly if they were engaging in yoga as part of their exercise program, I would be thrilled about that, and I would see nothing wrong. Certainly we have good studies that show that you can get a small, maybe to medium effect size with yoga. So I think that's a great possibility as well. So there's not a lot I can say prescriptively. We know it's positive, but we know that there's individual differences.
Thank you. And Bonnie, do you have more questions? I have a few as well.
I always have questions. You speak to the importance of the deep sleep drive, and is that your? Did I take your question? No. Oh,
That's
we're freezing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just would like a bit more on that deep sleep drive and its importance. And I believe the deep sleep drive happens when we first fall asleep, but it's not the majority of our sleep. So if you could just explain that a little bit better for us, more extensively, not better.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, the deep sleep drive, this is part of a system that we call a homeostatic system. It's a balancing system. It's actually the system that makes up for lost sleep. And it makes up for lost sleep by producing greater amounts of deep sleep, not more sleep. So, and we only get about 20% of deep sleep throughout the night. And it happens almost all in that first half of the night, not clock time, but the first half of your sleep attempt. And I say that because that's why naps aren't the greatest for somebody with insomnia, because when somebody says, oh no, I just did a tight 15 and I felt great, then I know they wiped out their deep sleep drive, because they would have gotten deep sleep in that time if they felt great. And so that's so we get it mainly in the first half of the night, that first half of the sleep attempt. And that's why in the second half of the night, it's fairly light. But that's okay. There's other important things that are going on, like REM sleep. And then when you get up, you're going to start building. And it's almost like we have to think of it like a relay race, right? So first thing in the morning, the important thing is that you start building up that drive for deep sleep. And so that's who's holding the baton. And then when you are about to go then you hand it over to the circadian system, which is really going to drive alertness throughout the day. And then right before bed, if the deep sleep driving system has really done its job, you've been active, then it's going to get the baton back, and it's going to be able to allow you to fall asleep in a normal amount of time and stay asleep. And that's what's going to be really important, and you're going to get your deep sleep. If people don't have a strong drive for deep sleep, then they're not going to make up for sleep, and they're going to feel like they have to do it themselves. And so they're going to go to bed early, and they're going to cut back on things, and they're going to try and stay in bed a little longer. They're going to try and nap. And that sends the message to that system, oh, you need less deep sleep. Okay. When really what they want is more deep sleep. And so if you understand that system, then you can decrease your time in bed a little bit temporarily. And then when your body responds by producing more deep sleep, then you can extend your time in bed and then get back on track.
Perfect. Thank you. Very helpful.
So to bring this to a close, I have two questions for you. And I think our audience and viewers will probably identify with this. One is that, how many hours should we exactly sleep, as normal, because we hear 6 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours. That's one. And the second is, you've been doing research now during the times of COVID. Is this an opportunity for us to repair our sleep? Because we are, some of us have a little bit more time at hand, and life is perhaps a little bit simpler now with all this. So those are my two closing questions.
Perfect questions. Okay, so I'm going to say the first question about how much we can sleep, is it 6 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours? Yes. So it depends. So the adult sleep need is normally distributed. And so although the average is going to be somewhere like around 7.5 to 8 hours, there are people who are watching this right now who, if I prescribed 8 hours to them, they would develop insomnia, because they have never been and will never be an 8-hour sleeper. They're a little bit less than that. We want people to be in that healthy range of normal sleep. And there are people that are watching this right now and they might not even know it, that they're actually greater than an 8-hour sleeper. And so that would be sleep deprivation for them to shoot for 8 hours, because they would set their alarm and get up when they're not quite done. And so if you always feel a little sleepy, that's one of the first things you should try, is do a little bit of sleep extension to see if you feel better. So can you use this time to try out some of those things? Yes. So if you're somebody that always feels a little sleepy, that falls asleep during the day, you could spend a little bit of extra time in bed and see if that makes you feel any better. If it doesn't, then I would encourage you to talk to your doctor, because sleepiness can be a sign of some other really serious problems. So if the extension doesn't work. But another thing, so that's the homeostatic side, but for other people, this might be a good time for you to be able to sleep in accordance with your body clock. So if you're a night owl and you're always having to get up early for work, and you're always a little bit shortchanged on sleep, just the way teenagers are, then this may be the time where you're actually able to get healthy sleep. And I was asked the other day, well, but isn't that going to make it hard when you go back to work and you actually have to stop that? Yes, but now is the time for you to actually get some healthy sleep. So take advantage of it. And a lot of families, because it's genetically determined, the whole family is sleeping like they're shifted over like an hour and a half or 2 hours, and everyone's sleeping great and feeling great. And they're like, I don't know, my whole family has done it. Well, I mean, they may be all genetically related if they're in the same house, and so that may be what's going on. So I have some people who are sleeping very well right now, better than they normally do, and oftentimes, and they might even have insomnia under normal circumstances, but they don't have performance anxiety for work, and they might be able to follow their own schedule. So by taking this time to learn about your body and your sleep and what really works for you, then when you go back to work, you may be able to make some adjustments in your schedule, like, oh, I actually need to spend more time in bed than I thought. Oh, I actually need to spend a little bit less time than I thought. Oh, I need to get up a little bit later. Why don't I move stuff from my routine in the morning to the evening before so that I can get an extra half an hour in the morning? And I think that there's a lot that we can learn about ourselves during this time and our sleep system that we can carry forward and create something positive.
So thank you, Professor Khani. Those are really excellent points to close our evening. And I apologize to our viewers that we are not doing this live exactly, but I'm hoping that you'll watch this and come back with comments and questions. We'll be posting it on cmap.com website as well and YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it both on Facebook and on YouTube. So thank you again, Professor Khani, and we better let you have your good night's sleep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.